The call we're going to listen to is something I think a lot of people deal with. We get hit with an objection of just, how the hell did you get my number? And really, a lot of times when we get objections, it's not to the actual thing we're offering, but the objection is just to the interruption. There's a great book called Cold Calling Sucks, and That's Why It Works. But he talks about, he was writing the book and someone came up to him in a Starbucks and said, hey, are you open to saving animals? And he still hit him with the objection of like, no, even though logically, like, who's
Yeah.
against supporting animals? But he wasn't saying no to animals. He was saying no to the interruption of his day. And so sometimes just breaking through somebody being aggravated for the interruption is something we need to be prepared for. But a lot of people just stall out right there. How do you think about objections, especially this one?
Yeah, so I think, there are different types and you will get valid objections, but you're not going to get them in the first 30 seconds or 2 minutes of a cold call or a sales pitch, right? If someone's shrugging you off in that first few moments, they're very much objecting to the interruption, as you've said, Bob. It's not I'm objecting to what you're pitching to me or what you're proposing to me. And I think often, and again, I think this guy said, not only where do you get my number and ask me to delete it, but it's also I'm not interested with the words that came out of his mouth. And I think really what he's saying is I'm not interested in taking this call right now. I'm not interested in being interrupted as part of my day, rather than actually not being interested in either myself or what I'm selling. And I think what many salespeople do when they hear I'm not interested in the first 30 seconds is take it personally or try to just essentially I just hear these blurt outs in offices, and I've been guilty of it, where it's just like, well, what are you not interested in? Well, why aren't you interested? And they start an argument, and it should never be an argument. An objection should be something that you should be curious about, and basically it's a trigger to ask a question when you hear an objection. As soon as you hear anything like that, you can't go with telling, you have to go with asking questions. There's a guy called Brian Tracy, and he's written a few different sales books, one of which is Psychology of Sales. And his tagline is telling is not selling, only asking questions is selling. And I think whenever you get an objection like that, it's just clear to understand, as you've said, they're only objecting to you interrupting their day, not your product at this point. And if you've got a product that can help them, you owe it to the prospect to continue on with your pitch.
A lot of times what I see is people speed up. So they'll get that first objection
Yeah.
and they'll start moving faster and they'll try to almost Eminem from 8 Mile. He goes and he proactively says all the things that someone was going to hit him with in the rap battle.
Yeah.
Actual instinct should be to slow yourself down
Yeah.
and take that breath and kind of actually almost lean back in your chair a little more. And I love what you said about they challenge or they get combative, and you really want to turn that wrestling match into a dance. You want to get on the same side of the table because you really do believe you're going to bring them value if you've prospected the right way.
Precisely. And what I often say, especially to younger salespeople coming up, is they have a sales team, right? Any business you're calling has a sales team. Sometimes when they start asking where you got their number from, you just need to remind them of that. They have probably worked in sales themselves if they're a business owner. And if they're asking where you got your number from, just say, look, I understand you've probably got a sales team, right? And they will then acknowledge and be like, right, yeah, okay, I understand. And then you can just ask another question quickly. But I think you're absolutely right, Bob. It's just important to never take these things personally.
Did you want to get into kind of your framework here and how you get in the call?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, to start off, basically in this call, I think you've kind of alluded to it, but I got told straight up that this person's not interested. How'd you get my number? Delete my number. And this is where most people kind of hang up. But I think for new starters who are hearing this a lot, where the real selling starts is at this point when you're getting delete my number or I'm not interested. So I'm just going to break down kind of how it's been turned around and how you guys, next time you hear this, you can actually book the meeting anyway.
Hi, Nick. It's Joe calling from Chat Automation. How are you?
Not bad, thanks. Where are you from, sorry?
From Chat Automation. So we spoke last week on Thursday. I briefly introduced myself and we were discussing Dwight. Essentially, he is a digital worker who automates all of the middle and back office processes.
Yeah, I remember your call, actually. I was in the middle of the meeting when I don't feel very interested, to be honest, but thank you anyway.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask one quick question?
As well, it really annoys me how you've got hold of my number from somewhere, my personal mobile number.
Yeah, I'm guessing, Nick, do you guys have like a business development team at
What, sorry?
do you have a BDM team at?
Yeah, so basically what he's saying is that I don't think we're interested, to be honest. Can you delete my number? That is standard brush off mentality. And he's just decided, I'm busy now. I know this guy's called me. I heard him pitching me last week. I don't want to deal with a pitch.
So I think it's interesting because already you can start to sense just by hearing it that you get a short answer when you say, "How are you?" Good. Like a one
Yeah.
or two word answer. You hear the voice inflection go down. When you start to hear that, this isn't a chatty person. Normally, you'll know if they're game for a chat. "Oh, good, good. How are you?" It's some repetition. You ask, "How are you?" He responds naturally and directly, and doesn't ping pong.
Yeah, so I think it was a tough one to gauge because I like to get the meeting booked on the very first call that I have with some of these guys. But I'd spoken to him, like I said, the last week, and there was interest there, and his response, funnily enough, the week before was very positive. And the second time you call them, you're never typically going to get the same positive response you do the first time. You have to find a new way to hook them back in. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But you want to be able to book the meeting there and then. And often it just comes down to, again, asking more questions or at least getting a better cold call opener. But of course, like I said, we don't get it right the first time. And on this call, I certainly didn't. But hearing him say, "I don't think we're interested. Can you delete my number?" I've got a lot of confidence in knowing who my ICP is and knowing that he fits within our ICP as being a prospect that we can fix. So although I could have just said, "Look, no worries," and move on, I wanted to kind of soften the moment and just kind of change the rhythm of the conversations. The reason that I'm bringing up the business development team, it's not massively important, but there's kind of two sides to it. One is reminding him I'm a salesperson and you also have a sales team. Give me that kind of time of day, because it's a job. Of course, giving that professional courtesy. But secondly, it's a bit of a pattern interrupt, right? I'm not arguing with him and I'm not trying to convince him that I'm worth listening to. I'm simply just asking a question that doesn't threaten him. It's just, let me bring you back into the conversation and ask you something about your business to get you off of the "what have you called me" mind frame and into the "let's actually have a conversation" mind frame instead.
You say threaten. I think that's a really interesting word because a lot of times they just want autonomy in terms of where we're going. If
Yeah.
they concede to you and your sales process, this could be 20 minutes, this could be 30 minutes. I could be on a roller coaster and I have no idea what the loops and the drops look like. So it's giving them some autonomy back by softening, like you said, asking a question, and they feel at least like they have more control in where we're going. And I think you get more buy-in and you get further that way.
Absolutely. No one wants to be stuck on a cold call, especially if it's with a salesperson who isn't going to listen to them. I think that's where people get put off having sales calls, is they say no or they put up an objection and the sales guy just gets rude or is, "Well, why aren't you interested? How do you know you're not interested? I've only just spoken to you." And this is kind of rookie sales moves where it makes people not want to take sales calls. I've taken calls like that myself, right? And I think that's the point, is to understand that you're a professional. You're not going to be threatening like that. You're just going to start asking questions and stay interested in them.
Yeah, we have to overcome a lot of bad salespeople that have come before us, right? So we have to break that pattern and make them feel safe and not threatened, to your point.
If that's the case, are you just trying to get me off the phone right now?
Yeah.
Because if they say yes, then I'll go, "Fine, no problem. I've obviously called it a bad time.
Yeah.
Can I ask one quick question just to see if what I'm calling you about is even relevant?" If you get a yes to that, as long as the question that you ask next is good, you may well just stay on the phone and end up booking in the meeting.
Sometimes even with the enticement of, so I can update my system so you don't get more calls like this, or
Yeah.
a lot of people will be interested in just not getting more calls because you're not interested and you don't feel like we're a fit for what you guys are trying to accomplish, or is this just a bad time of the day? And at least it'll give you some context that you can work off with to move your deal forward or disqualify.
Yeah, precisely. It's about progressing the conversation, and you can't do that unless you're asking questions. Yeah, in one key question, the one thing I want people to listen to on this next step is just the question that we're asking, because he responds kind of puzzled, but he does answer me, and that does allow me to kind of laugh a little bit. But from here, what I'm looking to do is just reframe the value of what I'm calling about. So I want to shift the topic away from me and my company and why I'm calling him towards a business problem that's actually relatable to him. And I want to do that in one question because I know I haven't got a lot of time.
It's a similar space, right? I can get rid of the number afterwards. I do want to make sure, absolutely, it's not going to make commercial business sense for you guys. Typically what I ask is, do you have like a large middle and back office team who are doing a significant amount of onboarding, compliance, credentialing? So the reason I ask that is, if you guys were looking to grow, would you have to hire more people and therefore have to sacrifice some form of profitability if you weren't able to automate that?
Yeah, but I mean, but to be honest, we're largely kind of automated. We've just got people that sort of, I mean, the extent of the onboarding that we have to do is probably further than, I don't know. Are you working with like other education recruiters at the moment?
Yeah, education and the healthcare sectors are the ones that primarily actually are the largest portion of agencies that we work.
So yeah, but it's one question that's changed things around, right? And I think, like I said, if when you know you only have one, it has to be end result focused, and it has to show the cost of doing nothing. So that was the whole point of that. Is I don't want to be pushy. I just want to ask one question, make sure it makes commercial business sense for you guys or not in one question, and I tell him that's what I'm doing by asking that question before I do it. And then from there, it's, do you have a large middle and back office team? If that team were to grow, would you have to hire more people if you couldn't automate some of the processes they're having to do? Is that going to affect your profitability? Because as a director, that's going to affect his dividends at the end goal. And it's again back to that cost of doing nothing. Can I afford to just shrug this guy off the phone right now? Because now he's talking about me being able to make profits and actually something that's going to help me scale my business.
Risk aversion, the cost of doing nothing. A lot of times people are more motivated to do something for the fear of losing something versus gaining something. So it's like Chris Voss talks about this a lot in Never Split the Difference. Every day you don't work with me, you are losing $1,000 versus I can make you $1,000 every day. The first one is actually more scary to people. Losing out or fear of missing out or FOMO, that actually drives people to make changes more than potentially gaining something.
You saw the change in the way he was responding off the back of that just one question, right? He went from shrugging me off to suddenly being curious and asking me if we work with businesses similar to his, and maybe thinking, well, we're education, maybe you can't, we have a lot of onboarding compliance that's quite technical, maybe you can't help me with that. But he was curious to see if we could, and that's where that social proof comes back in as well. And we can say, actually, it's near enough all we work with, right? It's education and healthcare, because there is so much compliance. But his attention is there now because of the way that it's been reframed.
It's almost like, well, if I don't start to maybe at least look into this, my competitors will be outrunning me by using things like this automation piece. So it's almost like cool kids are doing it. They're potentially afraid to miss out on that. I even know there's some templates out there, or some ways that people introduce themselves by saying, "Hey, my name's Bob. I'm calling from XYZ company. We work with a lot of people in your space." You probably heard my name tossed around a little bit, and they're like, "No,
Yeah.
why haven't I?" Okay, if you work in my space a bunch, and it at least gets them. It's one of those pattern breaking things to make sure that they're not having that loss aversion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tactic that I don't use as much in Meet Dwight now, because we have to be careful when we start automating for one business in one sector. They don't want all of their competitors to know that they're actually using our automation. So we can't always name names anymore. It's a case of very much just being able to say other agencies in your area. But I know at the last business that I was with, Socially Recruited or Gaia, as soon as I'd booked a meeting and that meeting had gone positively with a large hotel group, I was calling that next hotel group to say, I've just sat down with X, Y, and Z. Are you also open to looking at that? And it booked me so many meetings, just calling every other large hotel group. And then I've done the same for restaurants. I've done the same for care groups, because essentially, they've all got the same problems, and you get sector specific problems. You can call up leading with that question. And when you start dropping competitors' names in, people fear missing out, like you said earlier.
Yeah. Or even just explaining the profile and their typical pain points. They're going to be, okay, he's credible. I can see we have similar things like that. And so I know that he's at least having conversations and solutioning with people. It's almost a third party recommendation by just being able to label the problems that sector or that
Yeah.
vertical's having. And I always love when people, when they find something, like you were saying, if we work with a lot of hotels and that becomes their prospect list, because it's, you don't make any extra money by closing every single sector that exists. You make money by closing business. So if you have something and you have a solution that works within a state or an industry or a vertical, just be the expert there, because you're going to be able to have the reinforcement and the reference level for the solutions that you're able to talk about. Your case studies are going to be off the chart.
Absolutely. I think once you've started as an AE, I mean, SDR's cold calling, you can do anything. But as an AE, being in control of your pipeline and what you call, your prospecting list should come from your most recently closed deals, right? Because that's the knowledge, you know, every step to their sales process, you know, every issue that they've had, all the risks that could have come up with that deal. And then you know what you're going into when you're calling that same kind of prospect.